In the Middle Ages, fear could destroy a man long before the sword ever touched him. Tonight, you follow a frightened soldier accused of cowardice through muddy roads, candlelit halls, harsh judgment, and the cruel silence of a village that never forgets. If you enjoy slow, atmospheric medieval stories for sleep and relaxation, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now, get comfortable and step quietly into a world where one moment of fear could become a lifetime of shame. Hey guys, tonight you find yourself stepping through the low mist of a medieval village at dusk, where the stones sweat with cold. The straw lies damp beneath the eaves, smoke curls up into the rafters of timber cottages, and the distant bell of the manor chapel trembles across the muddy road. Your boots are already heavy with clay, your cloak smells faintly of wet wool and horse breath, and torchlight shivers along puddles like little pieces of broken gold. Somewhere beyond the river, a cartwheel complains in the dark, and a dog barks as if it has been personally offended by the weather. Medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience. You probably would not last a week out here, not because you lack spirit, but because even the pillows appear to be made of grudges. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and, as the bell keeps calling through the mist, leave a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand beneath the crooked sign of the village alehouse, feeling the first drops of evening rain gather on your hood, while the bell continues to sound from the small stone chapel near the manor yard. It is not the clear, cheerful ringing of a feast day. It is heavier than that, slower, pulled by a boy whose hands are likely raw from the rope. Each note rolls over the thatched roofs, over the pig pens, over the winter cabbages lying stubborn and dark in their beds, and into every doorway where people pause with knives, ladles, spindle whirls, and half-mended shoes in their hands. The muster bell has a way of finding everyone. A woman carrying a basket of coarse bread stops beside a water trough, her breath pale in the air. A bent old man with a fur-lined cap crosses himself, though no one can quite agree whether crossing yourself during a muster brings courage or merely reminds heaven to keep an eye on your accounts. Two boys drag a bundle of firewood beneath a lean-to, and even they fall quiet, for children know the sound of worry before they know the words for it. A black hen struts through the mud with the confidence of a minor queen, entirely unconcerned with the troubles of men. In truth, the hen may be the wisest creature present. You follow the others toward the manor green, where a ring of churned earth spreads before the low hall and its open timber porch. Torches are being set in iron brackets. Their flames bend in the wind, showing faces in flashes, farmers with red hands, a miller with flour still caught in his beard, a tanner smelling sharply of hides, 3 young men trying to look older, and 1 older man trying very hard to look younger. They have been called from barns, fields, kitchens, and muddy lanes because the Lord has sent word that men must gather with bows, bills, spears, padded jacks, kettle hats, and whatever courage can be borrowed before morning. Courage, you soon learn, is expected to appear on command. Like good ale, it is usually found in smaller quantities than promised. Near the porch, the reeve stands with a wax tablet and a stylus, marking names by torchlight while a servant holds a lantern close enough to singe his sleeve. The reeve's cloak is patched at the shoulder, but the iron key at his belt is large and proud, the kind of key that suggests doors obey him even when people do not. Beside him rests a wooden chest bound with blackened metal, containing old muster rolls, a few coins for wages, and perhaps 1 or 2 accusations waiting patiently for the right season. In this village, paper is precious, parchment more so, and memory most dangerous of all. You edge closer through the press of bodies. The ground beneath your boots makes soft sucking sounds, as if the mud would rather keep everyone home. Men present their weapons one by one, a billhook polished from use, a spear with a crooked head, a hunting bow wrapped in waxed linen, a shield painted years ago with a device no one remembers clearly. One fellow brings a rusty helmet stuffed with wool against the cold, which is sensible, though it makes him look as if his head has decided to nest. The Lord Steward speaks from the porch, his voice thin but practised. Riders have come from the border road, a neighbouring lord has broken truce, cattle have been driven off, a granary has burned, the keep at Greyford needs men by dawn, and each household owing service must send its able body. The steward does not shout, he does not need to. The bell has already done the shouting for him. Around you, fear moves without admitting its name. It shows itself in small things, a man checking the same buckle again and again, another licking rain from his upper lip, another laughing too loudly at nothing. You see a young ploughman named Tom of the lower ford standing with his hands clasped around the shaft of a spear. His knuckles are pale. His mother, wrapped in a brown wool shawl, presses something into his palm. It may be a charm, perhaps a scrap of cloth touched to a saint's relic, or a little bag of fennel and rue, which some swear can steady a trembling heart. Others say such herbs only make your pocket smell like anxious soup. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the old cures comfort the body, the soul, or merely the person watching you receive them. The village priest arrives late, lifting his robes above the mud with no dignity at all. His tonsured head gleams in the torchlight, and his shoes are already losing their private war against the lane. He carries a small reliquary wrapped in linen, said to hold a bone chip of St. Oswin, though those who tell the tale never fully agree whether St. Oswin was a martyr, a hermit, or just a very persuasive traveller with excellent timing. One by one, men bow their heads as the priest passes. Some touch the reliquary, some kiss it, some glance at it sideways, as if worried the saint might recognize them from previous sins. The muster roll continues. Names are spoken aloud. Each name becomes heavier once heard by everyone. A man may fear quietly in his own cottage, but on the green, beneath the bell, fear must stand beside him in public. The steward asks after missing men. A brother answers for a brother. A wife answers for a husband who is supposedly ill. A neighbour mutters that illness has been catching only among those with good boots. This earns a few tired smiles, but not much warmth. Then the reeve calls a name, and no one answers. A pause opens. Rain ticks on leather caps. Smoke drifts sideways. The dog you heard earlier slips between the legs of the crowd and sits near your boot, as though it has chosen you for reasons known only to dogs and minor angels. The reeve calls again. Still nothing. No one says the word coward, not yet. It is too early for such a word, and too dangerous. In this place, cowardice is not merely a private failure. It can become a stain on a household, a fine in a manor court, a tale at the ale bench, a silence at weddings, a look exchanged over trenches of bread and pottage. In war, a man may be wounded, captured, ransomed, praised, forgotten, or buried beneath a wooden cross. But a man who refuses the bell may live long enough to hear his name rot in other mouths. The steward lowers his gaze to the roll. The priest murmurs something soft. The Lord has not yet appeared, but his hall door stands open behind the porch, spilling candlelight onto rushes laid over the floor within. You can smell beeswax, damp wool, ale, and the faint sourness of too many anxious bodies gathered under judgment. The bell stops at last. The silence afterward feels colder than the rain. You draw your cloak tighter, watching the men of the village shift and breathe and pretend they are ready. Somewhere in the dark, beyond the last cottages, the road to Greyford waits under mud, mist, and winter stars, and among these villagers, beneath torch smoke and the weight of unwelcome duty, the first small shape of tonight's tale has already begun to form, not in the clash of swords, but in the terrible quiet before anyone decides who was brave, who was afraid, and who will be made to pay for fear. You pass beneath the open porch and into the manor hall, where warmth gathers unevenly, as if the fire is generous but easily distracted. The floor is strewn with rushes, some fresh and sweet with meadow scent, others older and less innocent, holding memories of spilled ale, muddy boots, dropped bones, and whatever the dogs have been politely blamed for. Above you, soot-black rafters vanish into shadow. Smoke lingers there like an old servant who has forgotten the way out. Beeswax candles burn along the high table, their flames small and steady, while cheaper tallow dips gutter near the walls and smell faintly of sheep with opinions. You move with the men called by the bell, all of you damp at the edges, all of you trying not to look too relieved to be indoors. Cloaks are shaken, hoods are lowered, spears lean against the wall beside threshing flails, billhooks, bows, and one heavy mallet that probably began life with honest work and now looks embarrassed by its promotion. The dog that chose your boot outside slips in behind you, noses the rushes, and settles near the hearth with the confidence of a creature who has never paid rent, tithe, or market toll. At the lower tables, trenches of stale bread are set out, dark from rye and barley, hard enough to defend a small doorway if required. Servants ladle pottage from a blackened pot, thick with peas, onions, scraps of bacon, and the soft mystery of whatever had been closest to the cook's hand. A platter of smoked fish appears, silver skins dull in the candlelight. Wooden cups are filled with ale, because water is for washing carts, frightening horses, and, according to several villagers, weakening the character. You sit among the gathered men, shoulder to shoulder, wool steaming gently as it dries. The hall breathes around you low voices, the scrape of benches, the crackle of logs, the clink of a knife against a trencher. On the wall hangs an old shield painted with the Lord's faded device, a red beast that might once have been a lion, though time has made it resemble a disappointed weasel. No one mentions this. Heraldry is important, and so is survival. Near the hearth, the priest unwraps St. Oswin's little reliquary and places it on a stool covered with linen. The bone chip inside is hidden behind cloudy glass and silverwork rubbed thin by many hopeful thumbs. Men approach it in a slow line. Some touch 2 fingers to it and then to their foreheads. Some whisper names of wives, children, brothers, mothers. Some ask plainly not to die. One man asks not to look foolish, which may be the most honest prayer of the evening. No one can quite agree whether relics protect the brave, strengthen the frightened, or simply make fear feel witnessed by someone better connected than the local priest. When your turn comes, you feel the cool rim of the reliquary beneath your fingertips. The silver is worn smooth. The priest murmurs a blessing over you, and his breath smells faintly of ale and cloves. A remedy, some swear, keeps winter sickness from the chest. Others say cloves only make a coughing man more expensive. You bow anyway. in a world of damp straw, uncertain harvests, and lords with urgent messages, refusing help from saints seems poor manners. Across the table, Tom of the Lower Ford sits with his spear between his knees. His mother's charm cord peeks from his sleeve. Beside him, a broad-shouldered carter named Will laughs too loudly, telling anyone who will listen that he has no fear of border raiders. He says this 3 times, which convinces no one. A miller's son sharpens a knife against a small whetstone, though the blade already looks sharp enough for bread, rope, and unfortunate decisions. An older archer with a grey beard watches them all without comment, working wax into his bowstring with careful fingers. The missing man's name returns in whispers, not loudly, not officially. It moves between cups and trenches like a draft under a door. Robert Atbrook, someone says, called twice and not seen. His wife claimed fever, another answers. Fever of the knees, murmurs Will, and several men smile into their ale. Yet the smiles are uneasy. You can feel it. Mocking fear is safer than admitting you understand it. In the candlelight, courage becomes a garment everyone tries to wear at once, though it fits some badly and pinches others at the throat. You look down at your hands around the wooden cup and feel the warmth of ale seep into your palms. It is thin ale, common ale, the kind brewed in most cottages because grain must serve thirst as well as hunger. Still, it steadies the room. The steward enters from the screen's passage with 2 servants behind him, carrying a narrow box and a folded cloth. Conversations dim. He sets the box on the high table, opens it with an iron key, and removes a strip of parchment. The muster oath is not long, but it has weight. Each man owing service must swear to go with the Lord's company, keep formation, obey commands, guard his fellows, and not flee the field while banner and captain remain standing. The words sound clean when spoken from parchment. Life will make them muddier. One by one, men step forward. They touch the reliquary, or the cross on the priest's chain, or sometimes just the table edge, depending on how holy they feel and how close they stand. They speak the oath. Some voices are firm, some crack, some rush through the words as if speed might make heaven less attentive to the details. The priest watches with soft eyes, and the steward watches with sharp ones. Saints may forgive trembling, but stewards keep records. When Tom rises, his bench scrapes too loudly. You see his throat move. He places his hand on the reliquary. For a moment he says nothing. The hall listens with the hungry patience of people who have eaten poorly and fear worse. Then he speaks, not loudly, but clearly enough. He swears. Will claps him on the shoulder when he returns, nearly knocking him into the table. A little ale slops onto the rushes. The dog lifts its head, considers the loss, and goes back to sleep. This is perhaps the only creature in the hall with a proper sense of proportion. Later, as the candles burn lower and the hall softens into murmurs, stories begin to loosen. Men tell of old battles from their father's time, though those who tell such tales never fully agree whether the enemy was numerous, monstrous, foreign, starving, drunk, or all 5 at once. The grey-bearded archer says he once saw a man run before the horns even sounded, and for years afterward no one in 3 parishes would drink from the same cup as him. A servant says another coward was made to stand at the market cross with the distaff like a woman's tool in his hands, though the cook snorts and says that sounds like something invented by men who feared women's work because it lasted longer than war. This earns a low ripple of laughter, soft and tired. But beneath it, the question remains what happens to the man who runs, or hides, or freezes when others step forward. Is he punished by law, by lord, by priest, by neighbours, or by his own bed when sleep refuses him. Even now, it is hard to tell whether cowardice is a deed, a moment, an illness of the spirit, or simply fear caught by too many witnesses. You lean back against the timber wall, feeling heat on one side and winter damp on the other. The half-burned candle nearest you folds into itself, wax spilling like pale tears onto the table. Beyond the hall door, the bell is silent now, but its sound seems to remain in the beams and stones. The road to Greyford waits for morning, and around you men chew coarse bread, touch hidden charms, polish weapons, and speak of courage as though naming it might summon enough to share. Before dawn, the hall empties into a world the colour of old iron. You step out beneath a sky still holding the last dark of night, and the cold comes at your face with such personal attention that you almost admire its discipline. The men gather in the yard by torchlight, breath rising from them in pale clouds. Horses stamp near the stable wall. A servant tightens a girth with numb fingers. Somewhere behind you, the manor cook shouts at a boy to carry the oatcakes properly, not like a sack of turnips with ambitions. The bell rings once, not the long summons of the evening before, but a single hard note from the chapel tower. It slips across the roofs, catches in the bare branches, and fades toward the river. You remember how it sounded in the rain, how it pulled names out of cottages and laid them on the green. Now it sends those names onto the road. You trudge with the levy through the village lane, past shuttered windows and low doorways where wives, mothers, children, and old men stand wrapped in blankets. No one cheers. This is not that kind of morning. A woman presses a loaf into her husband's hands. Another ties a strip of red thread around a young archer's wrist, a charm against the evil eye, though some swear red thread only reminds enemies where to aim. A child offers a wooden saint carved so poorly that the holy figure appears to be suffering mostly from surprise. The soldier accepts it with solemn gratitude. Tom of the lower ford walks a little ahead of you, spear on shoulder, his hood drawn close. The charm from his mother is hidden now beneath his sleeve. Will the carter walks beside him, making a show of swinging his billhook lightly, as if it weighs no more than a feather. Every few steps he glances back to see who is watching. The grey-bearded archer follows with quieter strength, his bow rapped against the damp, his expression as unreadable as a locked oak door. The dog comes too. No one invited it, naturally. Dogs rarely wait for official business. It trots at the edge of the company, pausing now and then to investigate hedges, wheel ruts, and the private histories of other dogs. When a boy tries to shoo it home, the animal simply slips around him and continues, which is more or less how many campaigns begin. The road to Greyford bends beyond the mill, where the water wheel turns slowly in the mist. The miller has marked his door with chalked crosses against misfortune. No one can quite agree whether such marks keep danger away, or merely give misfortune something to read before entering. Beside the mill pond, reeds stand silver with frost, and the first faint light gathers behind them. You hear the creak of leather, the soft chink of buckles, the wet pull of boots from mud. The village shrinks behind you, losing its shape among smoke and roofs and the memory of warm pottage. At the first roadside shrine the company halts. It is a little thing, only a wooden box beneath a leaning ash tree, with a painted image of the Virgin faded by rain and touched by many fingers. Pilgrims have left tokens there, a bent pin, a scrap of ribbon, a small shell badge from a distant shrine, and one clay bead that may have been offered with great devotion, or simply dropped by someone with cold hands. The priest lifts St. Oswin's reliquary from his satchel and blesses the road. The men, the weapons, and, after a pause, the weather. This last blessing is received with particular interest. You stand with your head bowed while the wind moves through the hedges. A crow calls from a field. Somewhere, a cow complains in the low, resigned voice of all creatures who know humans are about to make trouble. The priest speaks of steadfast hearts. The steward checks the roll again, marking those present with a little nick of his stylus. Robert at Brook remains absent. His name is not spoken aloud, but it walks with the company anyway, as surely as any man with boots. Past the shrine, the road rises into open fields. Winter has left the earth tired and dark. Furrows lie heavy beneath frost. A few peasants already work near a barn, spreading muck with wooden forks, because war may come and lords may quarrel, but fields remain deeply unimpressed by politics. One old woman pauses to watch the men pass. She spits 3 times into the road after them, an old habit meant to turn away bad luck. Will mutters that she might have aimed elsewhere. The archer tells him bad luck deserves a clear path. By mid-morning, you reach the toll gate at the edge of the Lord's lands. It stands beside a narrow bridge of damp planks over a brown stream. A toll-keeper in a patched cloak emerges from his hut, blinking as though surprised to find the world still using roads. He knows the steward and lifts the pole without payment, but not without complaint. Everyone in the Shire, he says, expects bridges to hold, gates to open, and toll-keepers to survive on gratitude, which is difficult to spread on bread. Beyond the bridge, the land changes. There are more broken fences, more empty byres, more cottages with smoke missing from their roofs. A cart lies abandoned near a ditch, one wheel cracked clean through. You notice the split hub, the muddy spokes, the way someone has removed the harness but left a sack of spoiled oats behind. The company slows. The steward sends 2 men to look inside a nearby shed. They return with nothing but a hen, which escapes immediately and runs down the road with the wild purpose of a creature who has seen enough government. Some swear raiders came 3 nights ago. Others say the family fled before any raiders arrived, hearing rumour and choosing speed over furniture. Even now, it is hard to tell whether war begins with fire, hoofbeats, or stories told too near a hearth. Fear travels faster than soldiers. It slips under doors, empties barns, makes honest folk hide grain beneath floorboards, and teaches children to hush when riders pass. At noon, you rest beneath a stand of leafless trees. Bread is shared, cheese is cut with small knives, a skin of ale goes from hand to hand. You sit on a fallen branch, feeling the ache in your feet bloom through your boots. The dog settles against your leg as if you have signed some agreement. Tom eats silently. Will jokes that Greyford's Keep had better offer decent stew after all this marching. The archer says soldiers are often promised stew, glory, and dry bedding, and should expect one of the 3 only by accident. The road waits again. You rise, draw your cloak close, and follow as the company moves toward darker woods and the border keep beyond them. The bell from the village is long out of hearing, but its echo seems to travel inside every man, counting steps, counting names, counting the distance between fear kept hidden and fear seen plainly beneath the open sky. By the time Greyford Keep rises from the wet land, the rain has returned with the patient cruelty of a tax collector. It falls softly at first, then steadily, then with the quiet confidence of weather that has no other plans for the day. You see the keep through a veil of grey, a squat stone tower on a low rise above the river bend, its walls dark with damp, its roof lines sharp against the cloud, its narrow windows watching the road like suspicious eyes. The company slows as it approaches the outer ditch. Water glints there beneath reeds and old leaves. A wooden bridge crosses it to the gatehouse, where two towers lean inward slightly, not enough to fall, but enough to make a traveller think about confession. Above the arch hangs the Lord's banner, limp in the rain, its red beast darker now, more soaked weasel than lion. A guard in a kettle hat peers down from the parapet and calls a challenge. The steward answers with his name, his Lord's seal, and a tone that suggests he has spent the whole march preparing to be annoyed. The gate opens with a groan of iron hinges and swollen oak. You pass under the arch into the smell of wet stone, horse dung, smoke, boiled onions, and men who have been wearing wool too long. The bailey is crowded. More levies have arrived before you men from upland farms, bowmen from river hamlets, a few mounted retainers in padded coats, servants leading pack horses, and boys carrying bundles of arrows wrapped in oilcloth. Chickens scatter before boots and hooves with more tactical sense than several nobles in history. Rain taps on helmets. Rain slides down spear shafts. Rain turns the yard into a brown stew no one has ordered, though everyone is forced to sample it through their boots. A groom curses softly while trying to keep a mule from stepping on a basket of turnips. The mule appears deeply committed to the turnips. In a corner near the stable, a woman in a blue hood sells hot oatcakes from a covered tray, and soldiers gather near her as if she commands greater loyalty than any captain. You stand beneath the gatehouse passage with the others, grateful for the roof, though the wind still pushes rain sideways through the arch. The stone beneath your feet is slick. The murder holes above are dark squares in the ceiling, and you try not to imagine unpleasant things coming through them. No one can quite agree whether gatehouses are built more to keep enemies out, or to remind friends that welcome has limits. The captains begin inspection in the bailey. They move from group to group with clerks, sergeants, and the steward, looking over weapons and calling names. Each man steps forward, shows what he has brought, and receives judgment in a glance. A spear too rotten near the head, a bowstring too damp, a padded jack missing half its ties, a helmet dented so deeply that its wearer must either have survived a great blow or stored turnips in it over winter. Repairs are ordered. Men are shifted into rough companies. Those with bows go one way, those with bills and spears another. Boys too young for the line are sent to carry water, arrows, messages, and fear from place to place. A monk from the nearby abbey moves through the yard with a bowl of holy water and a face made solemn by years of poor sleep. He sprinkles men, horses, banners, and once, by accident, the dog, which sneezes and looks betrayed. Some swear animals blessed before battle see ghosts before men do. Others say dogs see only sausages, and perhaps that is wisdom enough. The monk carries a small pouch of dried yarrow and woundwort at his belt, herbs used by infirmary brothers for cuts and bruises, and beside them a strip of parchment covered in tiny prayer words. It is not clear which remedy he trusts more, so he carries both. You watch Tom of the lower ford step forward for inspection. His spear is plain but serviceable. His hood drips over his brow. The sergeant checks the shaft, nods once, and points him toward the line of village spearmen. Tom exhales as though he has passed a test no one else noticed. Will the carter, beside him, flourishes his billhook before the sergeant can ask. The sergeant tells him to stop waving farm equipment near people he may later need alive. Will lowers it. Chastened for almost 3 breaths. All day the keep waits. That is the strange thing. For all the talk of war, most of the day is standing, shuffling, drying, being wet again, listening for orders, receiving none, and wondering whether courage leaks out faster through cold hands or soaked boots. You wait beneath the gatehouse while rain beads on your cloak. You wait near the stable wall while servants bring out baskets of coarse bread. You wait by the well while a smith's boy hammers a loose rivet back into a helmet. The sound rings bright against stone, tap after tap, like a smaller bell answering the one from the village. Inside the lower hall, where men are briefly allowed to warm themselves, rushes cover the floor in a thick, uneven layer. A fire burns low along the hearth, and a black pot gives off steam scented with beans, leeks, and some hopeful memory of meat. A scribe sits near a window slit, making marks on a roll with ink that refuses to dry in the damp air. His fingers are stained black, his nose is red. He looks at the assembled soldiers as if each one is a spelling problem waiting to happen. Names are taken again, oaths are remembered again, absences are noted again. Robert Atbrook is spoken at last, not by the steward but by a captain with a scar across his chin. The name drops into the hall quietly. A few men look down at their cups. Someone says fever. Someone else says he was seen yesterday near the South Lane. Those who tell the tale never fully agree where a missing man truly is in bed, in hiding, on an errand, under judgment, or already transformed into rumour. The scribe dips his quill and writes something small. Small marks can become heavy things. As evening presses against the keep, the rain finally weakens. Torches are lit along the bailey wall. Their flames tremble in the wet air, and the stones shine like black bread crust. You stand again beneath the gatehouse, watching men settle into corners, under carts, against walls, wherever a body may rest without being stepped on. Shame moves among them more quietly than hunger. Armour is heavy, yes, and weapons awkward, and wet wool a punishment no court has fully appreciated. But the thought of being named afraid before all these faces feels heavier still. The dog curls beside the cracked cartwheel near the stable, chin on paws. The half-burned candle from the manor hall is gone, yet you remember its wax folding into itself. Here, in Greyford's gatehouse, beneath old stones and new rain, you begin to understand that before any field is reached, before any banner rises in morning mist, war has already begun its private work weighing each heart, testing each silence, and making every man wonder whether he can stand when standing is all that is asked. Night settles over Greyford Keep without ever becoming fully still. It gathers in the corners of the bailey, under carts, beneath stairways, between stacked barrels, and in the narrow cracks of the gatehouse where the wind comes through with a whistle, thin enough to sound almost intentional. You sit near the lower hall hearth, where the fire has sunk into a bed of red coals, and every man leans toward it by instinct, as if warmth were a sermon no one argues with. The hall smells of wet wool, old rushes, smoke, leather oil, and bean pottage scraped nearly clean from wooden bowls. A few beeswax candles burn near the high table for the captains, while the rest of you live by cheaper light tallow dips, hearth glow, and the occasional flare when someone pokes the fire too eagerly. Shadows climb the rafters. Rainwater drips from cloaks hung on pegs. Somewhere outside, a mule brays with the despair of an animal who has heard the campaign plan. You stretch your cold fingers and listen as talk loosens again. It always does. Men can march for hours in silence, stand in rain as mute as fence posts, swear oaths before relics with pale lips. But once darkness and ale come together, words begin to creep out. A soldier from the upland farms tells of a charm against arrow wounds, 3 knots tied in a strip of linen, one for flesh, one for blood, one for bone. An archer replies that he has seen men with knots enough to rig a fishing net still fall over when struck. No one can quite agree whether charms fail or whether men simply ask too much of linen. Near the wall, the ink-stained scribe from earlier sits cross-legged on a bench, drying pages by the fire. He's been recording names, stores, weapons, and complaints, and possibly ranking them in order of irritation. His quill scratches softly. The sound is tiny beside the murmur of the hall. Yet your ear keeps finding it. Scratch, pause, dip, scratch, pause, dip. It is strange how a line of ink can feel more lasting than a shout. Tom of the lower Ford sits not far from you, turning his mother's little charm between thumb and forefinger beneath the table. He does not know you notice. His face is tired, and the smoke has reddened his eyes. Well, the carter is beside him, louder than the hour deserves, boasting that when raiders come he will knock 3 men flat before breakfast. The grey-bearded archer says that if Will insists on doing so before breakfast, he will at least save the cook some trouble. A little laughter passes over the benches. Then the story begins. It does not arrive all at once. No dangerous story ever does. It comes first from a servant carrying a pitcher, who says she heard from a groom, who heard from a gate guard, who spoke with a messenger from the South Lane, that Robert ap Brooke was not ill at all. He was seen at dusk near the alder copse, walking away from the village with a bundle over his shoulder. Another servant says no, not walking, hiding. A bowman says no, not hiding, praying. Will snorts into his cup, praying with a bundle. The archer looks at him over the rim of his ale. Many men pray with luggage when trouble comes. This is considered fair enough to earn a few nods. You sit quietly as the tale grows legs. Robert ap Brooke, absent from the muster, becomes first a sick man, then a frightened man, then a deserter before desertion has even been proven. Someone claims he once refused to cross a flooded ford because he heard a drowned woman singing beneath the water. Someone else says that is nonsense. The ford simply ran too high, and only fools argue with winter streams. A third man says Robert kept a hare's foot in his pouch for luck, but lost it last Michaelmas, which explains a great deal to those who enjoy tidy explanations. Even now, it is hard to tell whether people tell stories to uncover truth or to make truth less lonely. The priest enters, shaking cold from his sleeves, and hears enough to frown. He reminds the hall that illness may hide in the blood, that fear may seize a man like fever, and that judgment belongs first to God, and then, with rather less perfection, to lords and their courts. The steward, seated near the high table, says nothing. He eats bread from a trencher and watches the room. His iron key glints at his belt. You notice Tom listening. He does not join the jokes. When someone says Robert's knees turn to butter, Tom looks down at his own hands, perhaps imagining how easily any man might be made into a tale by those warm enough to talk. The charm in his fingers disappears into his sleeve. A captain's retainer, a narrow-faced man with a clipped beard, steps into the firelight and tells what he claims is the proper custom. If a man refuses service, he may be fined, stripped of goods, set in the stocks, or dragged before the Lord's court. If he runs from battle, worse may come public shame, loss of honour, even death if the captain makes an example. He says this calmly, as if discussing the price of oats. The hall grows quieter around him. PG-13, though the world may seem by candlelight, the medieval law of fear is not gentle, yet it is not simple either. A man may flee because he is faithless, because he is wounded, because he thinks the banner has fallen, because smoke blinds him, because his captain is dead, because rumour runs faster than command. Those who tell the tale never fully agree where fear ends and guilt begins. The monk with the yarrow pouch appears in the doorway then, carrying a basket of bandages from the infirmary chamber. He has heard the last part and lifts one brow. Some men run from cowardice, he says softly. Some run to fetch help. Best to learn which before sharpening the rope. No one laughs at that, not because it is grim, but because it is sensible, and sensible words often ruin a fine evening of accusation. The fire shifts. A log breaks inward, sending sparks up toward the rafters, where they die among the smoke. Outside, the watch changes on the wall. You hear boots crossing wet planks, a low challenge, an answer. The dog scratches at the hall door until a servant lets it in, then trots straight to the hearth and drops beside Tom's feet, as though selecting the most troubled soul for warmth. Tom gives it a small piece of crust. The dog accepts with grave mercy. The tale of Robert at Brook continues in corners, smaller now, but sharper. By candlelight, a missing man is easy to shape. His silence cannot defend him. His empty place at the bench becomes proof. His name, written by the scribe, waits like a cold coin on the table of judgment. You lean back against the wall, feeling sleep press gently at the edges of your thoughts. But the hall will not quite release you. You have seen how quickly fear becomes rumour, how rumour becomes record, and how record may become fate. Tomorrow, banners may rise over the misty field. Tomorrow, men may stand or stumble, obey or break, remember their oaths or lose them in the roar of the morning. But tonight, in the warm, smoky half-dark, you understand that a coward can be made before he runs, simply by being named in the wrong voice beside the wrong candle. Before the first grey of morning, the chapel bell begins to move in the tower. It does not ring loudly at first. It stirs, a small iron throat clearing above the keep, then sends one soft note down through the yard, through the shutter cracks, through the damp wool and uneasy dreams of men lying wherever sleep has permitted them. You wake on a bench near the hall wall with your cloak half over your shoulder and your neck arranged in a shape no monk would recommend. The hearth is low, the rushes smell of smoke, boots, and old spilled ale. A servant moves quietly with a taper, lighting candles one by one, and each little flame opens a pocket of gold in the dark. Men rise slowly around you, stiff and silent, rubbing eyes, finding belts, checking knives, touching charms. Someone has slept on a helmet and now bears a red circle on his cheek like a saint in a very specific martyrdom. Will the carter whispers that it gives him a noble look. The grey-bearded archer says it gives him a cookware look. Outside, the air is colder than before. You step into the bailey with the others, and the stones shine faintly beneath a skin of frost. The rain has passed, leaving the world rinsed and hard. Above the wall, the sky is a deep blue black, and a few stars remain over the river. Horses breathe steam in the yard. Men stamp their feet. Buckles are tightened. Bowstrings are checked under cloaks. The dog trots from the stable with straw on its back, looking better rested than anyone else, which feels unjust but not surprising. The chapel stands against the inner wall, small and square, built of pale stone darkened by age and weather. Its narrow windows glow with candlelight. You enter with the company, ducking beneath the low arch, and warmth closes around you in the form of bodies rather than fire. The chapel is crowded with soldiers, retainers, servants, 2 monks, the priest from the village, and a captain who kneels with his sword laid flat before him. The floor is cold stone, thinly strewn with rushes that crackle beneath boots. Along the walls hang painted saints with long hands and solemn eyes, watching everyone as if courage were something that could be inspected. Beeswax smoke gathers near the rafters, sweeter than the tallow of the hall. It mingles with damp wool, leather, iron, and the faint sharp scent of crushed rosemary scattered near the altar. Some swear rosemary strengthens memory, which may be useful when a man has sworn not to flee and suspects his legs are not scholars of oath-keeping. Others say it keeps evil airs away. No one can quite agree whether evil airs prefer chapels, battlefields, or crowded sleeping halls, but everyone breathes carefully just in case. You stand near Tom of the lower ford. His face is pale in the candlelight, though many faces are pale, and no one is taking a fair survey. He holds his spear upright beside him, the butt resting on the stone. Under his sleeve, his mother's charm makes a small lump against his wrist. Will stands beyond him, no longer boasting, his jaw working slowly as if chewing words he has decided not to speak. The archer kneels with some difficulty and then, once down, appears to regret every winter of his life. At the altar rests St. Oswin's reliquary, placed between two candles. Its cloudy glass catches the flame. Beside it lies a folded banner, still damp at the edges from yesterday's rain. The priest lifts his hands and begins the prayers, his voice low and steady, shaped by repetition and cold mornings. He speaks of duty, protection, mercy, and the guarding of souls. He asks that fear not master the men gathered here. He does not ask that fear vanish entirely, which seems wise. Any priest who has lived among farmers, widows, tax days, childbirth, winter roads, and noble commands knows better than to pray for impossible weather. The monks chant softly. Their voices move through the chapel like water under ice. You feel the sound in your ribs more than your ears. Around you, men bow their heads. Some close their eyes, some keep them open, fixed on the saints, the candles, the altar cloth, the captain's boots, anything solid enough to hold the mind still. A young bowman beside the door mouths a prayer out of time with everyone else, perhaps to a different saint, perhaps to all of them at once for efficiency. Then the priest speaks of cowardice. Not harshly, that would be easy. He speaks of it as a shadow that can fall over any heart. He says courage is not the absence of trembling, but the keeping of one's place when others depend upon it. He says a man who feels fear and stands may be dearer to heaven than one who never knew fear at all. This comforts the room for the length of a breath. Then he adds that abandoning one's fellows in peril wounds not only the body of an army but the soul of a community. That part lands heavier. You think of Robert at Brooke, absent and silent, already shaped by other mouths. You think of the scribe's ink, of the steward's key, of the old bell calling names from the rain. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether Robert's sin was refusal, sickness, confusion, or simply the misfortune of being missing when men needed someone to accuse. But here in the chapel, beneath the painted saints, uncertainty feels smaller than the need for order. The captain rises and touches the folded banner. The men are called to renew their oath, not one by one this time, but together. Hands lift. Some touch the reliquary, some touch sword hilts, spear shafts, bow staves, little wooden crosses, hidden bags of herbs, or nothing but their own chests. You lift your hand with them, feeling the air warm from so many breaths. The oath comes in a low murmur, uneven but strong enough, to stand, to obey, to keep faith, to hold while the banner holds. Tom's voice is barely above a whisper, yet it is there. When the blessing ends, each man files past the altar. The monk with the yarrow pouch marks brows with the thumb dipped in holy water. The water is cold. When it touches your skin, you feel suddenly awake. Another monk passes a small dish of salt, and a few men take a grain to place on the tongue. An old habit said to guard against corruption, lies, and bad spirits. Will takes 2 grains, then looks as if he regrets the enthusiasm. Salt is powerful, yes, but it remains salt. Outside, dawn has begun to pale the east. The bailey fills with quiet motion. The banner is carried out. The horses are led forward. The captains confer near the gate. Men adjust helmets and gloves, pull cloaks tighter, check each other's straps with the tender awkwardness of people pretending this is ordinary work. The dog slips between them, entirely unblessed in manner despite its sprinkling, and noses after crumbs near the chapel step. You pause beneath the chapel doorway and look back once. The candles continue to burn before St. Oswin's little bone. Wax trails down in soft folds. The saints on the wall keep their painted watch. Even now, it is hard to tell whether prayers change what waits beyond the gate, or only change the shape of the person walking toward it. But perhaps that is no small thing. As the gatehouse opens and cold morning enters the keep, you step with the others toward the road beyond the ditch, carrying the smell of beeswax smoke in your hair, the bell's last note in your bones, and the knowledge that fear has not been driven away. It walks with every man. The only question, soft and terrible as breath in winter air, is whether it will walk beside you or ahead of you when the grey field finally appears. The road beyond Greyford keeps slopes down toward the river flats, where morning mist lies low over the fields like wool pulled across a sleeping face. You move with the company beneath a sky slowly turning from iron to pearl. Behind you, the keep's gate closes with the deep wooden thud, not loud enough to frighten anyone, but firm enough to remind every man that returning is now a matter for later. The banner goes ahead, damp cloth lifting now and then when the wind remembers its duty. Spears tilt over shoulders. Bows are carried under cloaks. The mounted retainers ride at a walking pace, hooves pressing dark half-moons into the soft road. No one speaks much. There's little room in the mouth for words when cold air, prayer, and breakfastless worry have already settled there. A servant has passed around pieces of coarse bread before departure, and you chew yours slowly, tasting rye, ash from the hearth, and the faint bitterness of being awake before the sun has shown any personal commitment. At the edge of the flats, the company halts beside a line of pollarded willows. Their cut branches rise like blunt fingers against the mist. A ditch runs along the road, filled with brown water and a lace of ice at the edges. Beyond it spreads the field where the captains expect the enemy to come open ground. Winter stubbled, crossed by old furrows and bordered far off by hedgerows, bare trees, and a low ridge. It is not grand. It is not the sort of place minstrels would choose if minstrels had any respect for comfortable staging. It is only a damp field near a river, which is perhaps where more history happens than anyone likes to admit. Men begin to form in lines. This takes longer than songs suggest. Songs leap from trumpet to triumph with disgraceful speed. Real men shuffle, misunderstand, stand in the wrong place, move again, complain that someone's spear is poking their ear, and discover that mud has a strong opinion about formation. The sergeants walk up and down, placing spearmen in a block near the banner, archers forward and to the side, billmen where the ground is firm enough, or at least less ambitious in its sucking. You take your place among the footmen, close enough to see Tom of the Lower Ford 2 men ahead, his hood pushed back now, his hair damp at the temples. Will stands beside him. The carter's jokes have thinned with the mist. He grips his bill-hook and stares toward the ridge. The grey-bearded archer moves with the bowman, testing the air with a wetted finger, as if the wind might answer politely. The dog is nowhere to be seen at first, and then you spot it near the willow ditch, sniffing a clump of grass with the calm concentration of a scholar before a manuscript. If courage could be borrowed from dogs, armies would be much improved, though their discipline around kitchens would suffer. A horn sounds far off. It is not loud. It arrives through the mist as a low, bent note, uncertain at the edges. Men lift their heads. Somewhere ahead, beyond the pale veil of morning, another company is moving. You cannot see them clearly yet. Only hints a dark motion near the ridge, a flicker of metal, the upright teeth of spears, a horse's head appearing and vanishing as the mist drifts. No one can quite agree whether fog hides danger or makes men invent more of it than is there. Either way, every shape becomes possible. The captain rides along the line, speaking steadily. Hold. Watch the banner. Listen for the horn. Stay close. Do not break for plunder. Do not chase shadows. Do not run unless ordered. And if ordered, run together. His words are plain and almost comforting because they are things a body can do. Hold. Watch. Listen. Stay close. The priest's words from the chapel still live beneath them, but the captain's commands have boots on. You feel fear move through the line like wind through rushes. It does not roar. It whispers. It settles in the wrists, the throat, the belly. It makes men tighten straps already tight. It makes one young bowman laugh once, too sharply, then fall silent. It makes Will shift his weight from foot to foot. It makes Tom touch the hidden charm beneath his sleeve. It makes you notice every small thing, the bead of water sliding down your spear shaft, the steam from a horse's nostrils, the raw place on your thumb, the smell of damp earth rising from the furrows. A monk from the keep passes behind the line with a small bundle of herbs and linen, ready for what may come. At his belt hangs the yarrow pouch, darkened by rain. Some swear yarrow can close a wound if gathered under the right moon, though those same people usually disagree about the moon, the words to say, and whether the herb must be stolen from a churchyard or merely borrowed without witnesses. The monk's face gives no opinion. He has the expression of a man who trusts God, but also brought bandages. The enemy becomes clearer. They are not monsters. That's almost disappointing in a childish corner of the mind. They are men in wet wool and leather, with spears, bows, padded coats, kettle hats, tired horses, and banners drooping like laundry. Some are probably hungry. Some are probably afraid. Some may have kissed a relic before dawn. Some may have mothers who tied charms beneath their sleeves. War becomes stranger when the other side looks as cold as you feel. The first arrows are not yet loosed. The first charge has not yet begun. The field holds itself in a long breath. You stand beneath grey morning, watching the banner stir. The bell from the village is far away now, the chapel candles behind stone walls, the hall fire reduced to memory, yet all of it seems to gather here, the oath over St. Oswin's bone, the scribe's ink, Robert Atbrook's missing name, the whispered jokes, the wet road, the broken cartwheel, the monk's warning not to sharpen judgment too soon. Every man in the line carries more than a weapon. He carries those who will speak of him later. The horn sounds again, nearer this time. The captain lowers his hand. Around you, Men settle into place, not bravely as in songs, not beautifully as in painted books, but heavily, humanly, with cold feet and tight throats and breath showing in the air. Fear stands in the line with everyone else. For now, no one has asked it to leave. They ask only that it keep still. The first arrows rise so gently that, for one strange breath, they seem almost harmless. Dark strokes lift from the far line, curve against the pale sky, and vanish into mist before they find the field again. Men bow their heads under shields, hunch shoulders, murmur prayers too short to be elegant. A few arrows strike the mud with soft, ugly sounds. One taps against a helmet and spins away. Another lodges in a shield near you, quivering like a reed in river wind. No one moves. That is the first miracle of the morning. Not victory, not glory, only the fact that men remain where they have been told to stand. The captain's voice travels along the line, calm and rough. Hold. Watch the banner. Hold. You feel the word enter your bones. Hold is smaller than courage, easier to carry. Courage sounds like something carved above a castle gate, something sung after supper by people who are not there. Hold is a hand on your shoulder. Hold is your boots in the mud. Hold is the man beside you, breathing through his teeth and not stepping away. The archers answer. Bowstrings snap in a ragged wave. The grey-bearded archer stands among them with his feet planted wide, drawing and loosing, his face patient and sad, as if he is mending a fence rather than helping history misbehave. The mist breaks in slow strips. You see the enemy line shifting. Men shout, horses toss their heads. Somewhere a horn gives a cracked note and stops abruptly. Then the footmen begin to move. Not quickly at first. The enemy comes down from the ridge through the wet field, spears forward, banners lifting. Their boots strike the old furrows, slipping, catching, rising again. This sound reaches you as a deep trampling murmur. Your own line tightens. Someone behind you whispers the name of a saint 3 times. Someone else whispers the name of his wife. Will mutters that he should have eaten more bread, which is possibly the most common military regret of the age. Tom of the lower ford stands 2 men ahead, spear angled with the others. You can see the back of his neck, pale beneath damp hair. His shoulders rise and fall. He is still there. His mother's charm is hidden, but you imagine it pressed against his wrist, warm now from skin and fear. No one can quite agree whether such little bundles hold power, but in that moment you understand why hands seek them. A charm is something small enough for terror to grasp. The lines close. There is noise, but not the clean, bright noise of tales. It is muddled, heavy, crowded wood striking wood, iron scraping, boots sliding, men calling names, captains shouting orders no one hears fully, the wet slap of mud, the dull thud of shields. You remain behind the front rank, pressed by bodies before and behind, breathing wool, leather, cold sweat, and churned earth. There is no room for grand gestures. The field has narrowed to the span of your arms and the banner glimpsed above helmets. You do not see the whole battle. No one does, not from inside it. You see pieces, a spear shaft splintering, a horse without a rider trotting sideways in confusion. The dog, impossibly, racing along the ditch and barking at everyone with equal disapproval. The monk dragging a stumbling man toward the willows, Will swinging his bill hook too high and nearly losing his balance. The archer stepping back, calm as winter, to draw again. Then the pressure shifts. A shout rises somewhere to the left. Not an order. Not exactly. more like fear discovering a mouth. Men turn their heads. A gap opens near the hedge line, where a cluster of spearmen has stumbled back from a push. The banner remains standing, but the men nearest the gap do not all see it. Mist, bodies, and panic make poor windows. Someone cries that the flank has broken. Someone else cries that it has not. Those who tell the tale never fully agree which cry came first, only that both were believed by someone. Tom turns. It is a small thing at first, a glance over his shoulder, a half step back. His spear lowers, a man bumps him from behind. Will shouts something, perhaps his name, perhaps a curse, perhaps only a sound. Tom's face is not the face of a villain. It is not wicked, not sly, not full of betrayal. It is white with the terrible simplicity of wanting to live. Another shout comes from the left. Tom steps away. For a moment, no one stops him. This is how many fates begin, not with thunder, but with everyone too busy to notice the first movement. He pushes through the second rank, then the third, stumbling in the mud, his spear dragging behind him. You see his charm cord come loose from his sleeve, a little twist of cloth and herbs swinging at his wrist. He looks once toward the banner, and even now, it is hard to tell whether he sees it clearly, whether he thinks it fallen, whether he hears an order no one else hears, or whether fear has filled the world so completely that nothing remains but the road behind. Then others see. Back someone shouts, "Hold him!" But the line is pressed, and the field is crowded, and no man easily reaches another through fear and spears. Tom breaks from the formation and runs toward the willow ditch, not fast like a hero in escape, but awkwardly, slipping, catching himself, nearly falling, his breath torn out of him. An arrow strikes the mud near his feet, and he flinches so sharply that he drops his spear. He does not pick it up. You watch him go. The battle does not pause for judgment. It continues in its muddy, confused, human way. The captain's voice rises again, furious and steady. The gap closes. Will is shoved forward by the men behind him and finds himself standing where Tom had stood. His face changes. All his boasting drains away, leaving only a broad, frightened man holding a farm blade with both hands. He stays. That, too, is a kind of story. The enemy push weakens before noon. Perhaps their own fear works upon them. Perhaps the arrows have done enough. Perhaps the river flats, the mud, the stubborn line, and the sight of the banner still lifting in the grey air persuade them that this damp piece of earth is too costly. No one can quite agree later. Men rarely agree about why battles end. They only agree that they are glad when they do. When the horn finally calls the company to hold position rather than advance, you stand with trembling legs in a field churned dark underfoot. The mist has thinned. The banner still rises. Will leans on his billhook, breathing hard, eyes fixed on nothing. The grey-bearded archer wraps his bowstring with careful fingers. The monk moves quietly among those needing help. Near the ditch, Tom is gone from sight. His spear lies in the mud. You look at it longer than you mean to. A plain village spear, inspected yesterday in the rain, accepted by the sergeant with a nod. Now it rests half sunk between two furrows, already gathering dirt along the shaft. It seems too small a thing to carry a man's future, and yet everyone who sees it understands. Before sunset, the spear will speak louder than Tom can. By night, his absence will have a shape. By tomorrow, if he is found, the field will follow him into the bailey, into the hall, into the scribe's ink, into every mouth waiting by candlelight. The cruelty is not only that he ran, it is that he lived long enough to be seen running. The return to Greyford Keep is slower than the march out, though the road is shorter, or seems so. Men come back in uneven clusters, some leaning on spear shafts, some silent with exhaustion, some talking too quickly because silence would let the morning catch up with them. The mist has lifted into a dull white sky. Mud grips every boot. The banner, still upright, hangs stained and damp from its pole. No longer a promise, but proof that the line held long enough. You walk with the others toward the gatehouse, feeling the ache of the field in your legs and shoulders. No great song rises, no minstrel would be pleased with this procession. There is only breath, leather creak, the clatter of a dropped buckle, the occasional low order from a sergeant, and the squelch of men who have discovered that mud follows victors with the same enthusiasm as the defeated. Glory, apparently, has poor drainage. At the ditch before the keep, the gate guard lowers his spear in salute, then lifts it again quickly when a pack horse tries to interpret the gesture as an invitation. The oak gates stand open. Inside the bailey, servants hurry to receive the company. Water is carried. Horses are led away. The monk with the yarrow pouch directs men toward the infirmary chamber. A cook's boy passes with a basket of bread and looks at everyone with wide eyes, already gathering enough memory to exaggerate by supper. You pause near the stable wall, where the dog has somehow arrived before you. It sits beside the cracked cartwheel from the day before, tail sweeping through straw, looking pleased with itself and entirely unwilling to explain its route. No one asks. There are mysteries in the world best left to dogs, saints, and toll-keepers. The captains gather near the centre of the bailey. The steward stands with his roll. The scribe is there too, inkhorn at his belt, quills tucked carefully beneath his cloak to keep them dry. Men are counted, names are called, answers come weary and flat. Here, here, here. Some names receive no answer, and the scribe makes marks that seem too small for what they mean. Then Tom of the lower ford is called. The bailey quiets, not at once, but in ripples. A groom stops leading a horse. A servant lowers a bucket. Will the carter looks down at his hands. Rainwater drips from the eaves of the stable, though the rain has ended. The steward calls the name again. No answer. A sergeant steps forward and lays Tom's spear on the ground before the captains. It has been recovered from the field. Mud along the shaft. Iron head nicked, but not broken. There is no blood on it, no clear sign of struggle, nothing dramatic enough to excuse or condemn by itself. Only absence, only a dropped weapon, only witnesses with frightened memories. The captain with the scarred chin looks over the assembled men, who saw him leave the line. No one moves at first. This is another kind of fear, quieter than the field. To speak is to become part of the record. To stay silent is to keep your own cloak cleaner, at least for now. You feel the bailey holding its breath as it held the morning mist. Will speaks first, but badly. He says Tom stepped back. Then he says there was shouting. Then he says he does not know whether Tom heard an order. His broad face flushes red under the grime. He looks miserable, as if the truth is a heavy sack he cannot lift without dropping some of it. The captain listens without interrupting. Another man says Tom ran. A third says the left side was confused, that someone shouted the flank had broken. A fourth says the banner was still standing and any fool could see it. The grey-bearded archer, who has been standing apart with his bow under one arm, says softly that in mist, fear can move faster than sight. The captain turns to him. Did he flee? The archer's jaw tightens. He left his place. It is not mercy, exactly. It is precision. Yet in that hard yard, precision feels almost kind. No one can quite agree whether Tom has been captured, hidden himself, drowned in the willow ditch, or found some hollow in the land where shame cannot follow. A pair of riders is sent to search the river road. 2 footmen are told to check the hedges beyond the field. The steward records the order. The scribe writes Tom's name with a space left beside it, as though fate has not yet delivered the rest of the sentence. By late afternoon, Tom is found. Not far away. That is the cruel part. Not vanished into legend, not carried across the border, not swallowed by deep forest or enemy hands. He is discovered in an abandoned shepherd's hut beyond the alder copse, shaking beneath an old wool cloak, his boots caked with black mud, his charm cord torn and empty at his wrist. The men who bring him back do not drag him, but they do not walk gently either. He stumbles between them through the gatehouse while the bailey turns to watch. You see his face. It is not the face of a man relieved to be alive. It is the face of someone who has survived the first danger and met the second waiting at home. The steward orders him held in the lower storehouse, where sacks of grain stand against the walls and iron keys hang from a peg beside the door. Grain is life in winter, so the room is strong, dry, and watched. A strange place for judgment to wait, among barley, oats, salted fish, and the careful wealth of survival. Tom says little. Once, as he is led past, he looks toward Will. Will looks away. Even now, it's hard to tell whether Will's turned face is anger, pity, shame, or terror that he understands too well. At dusk, the captain sit in the lower hall to hear what may be heard. This is not quite a manor court, not quite a battlefield court, not quite a council of war, but in the Middle Ages many things become official once the right men sit at a table with candles. The steward lays out the roll, the scribe prepares his ink, the priest stands nearby, hands folded into his sleeves. Rushes cover the floor, freshly scattered over the worst of yesterday's damp, and the smell of crushed reeds rises beneath the heavier scents of smoke and stew. Tom is brought in. He stands before the table without his spear, without his hood, without the small protections that made him part of the line. His hair is clotted with mud, his lips are pale. The captain asks whether he left his place. Tom whispers yes. The captain asks whether he was ordered. Tom closes his eyes. He says he heard shouting. He thought the line had broken. He thought the banner had fallen. He thought... The captain cuts him off, not cruelly, but because thought is difficult to weigh. The priest asks whether he meant to abandon his fellows. Tom's mouth trembles. He says no. He says he could not breathe. He says the field became sound and fog and pushing bodies, and his legs moved before his soul could catch them. Some in the hall shift at that, because it is a foolish answer and a true one, and foolish true answers are the hardest to punish cleanly. Witnesses speak. Will says the banner stood. The archer says confusion was real. The sergeant says the dropped spear endangered the rank. The monk says fear can seize the body like a sickness, but sickness does not mend a broken line. The steward says discipline must be seen. The priest says mercy must also be seen, though perhaps not in so many words, for priests learn to wrap sharp things in linen. Those who tell the tale never fully agree on the captain's heart that evening. Some later say he wished to make an example. Some say he remembered a day when he too had nearly stepped back. Some say the Lord's law left him little choice. You only see him sit beneath the candlelight, face drawn, fingers resting near the recovered spear laid across the table. At last he gives judgment. Tom will not die. The word passes through the hall like air returning to a room. But he will be punished before the garrison and before the market when the company next goes down to the town. He will lose his pay, surrender his weapon, stand publicly named as one who abandoned his place, and serve the keep in the lowest labour until the captain releases him. Shame, not blood, will do the work. It sounds merciful. It also sounds endless. Tom bows his head. The scribe writes. The steward seals the record. The priest murmurs a prayer so quietly it might be for Tom, for the captain, or for everyone who has ever mistaken survival for escape. You sit at the edge of the hall, watching the half-burned candles tremble in the draught. Outside, the evening bell begins to ring over Greyford's wet stones. Its notes are softer than the village muster bell, but they carry the same old lesson. A name once called in public no longer belongs entirely to the person who bears it. The next market day comes under a sky as low and grey as unwashed wool. You leave Greyford Keep with a small company just after morning bells. Following the road down from the river rise toward the town clustered beyond the bridge. The air smells of frost, wet leaves, and distant hearth smoke. Cart wheels grind slowly through the ruts. Pack horses snort steam. Men walk with cloaks drawn close and hoods low, not because rain is falling, but because shame travels today, and no one wants too much of it on his face. Tom walks near the centre of the party. He is not bound with rope. That would be simpler, perhaps too simple. Instead, he carries no spear, no knife, no sign of being trusted with iron. His belt hangs empty. Around his shoulders is a coarse grey cloak that belongs to the keep stores, rough enough to scratch even through a tunic. A strip of undyed wool has been tied across his chest, not like a noble sash, but like a label no one needs to read. The captain has ordered that he stand at the market cross when the town is fullest. Public disgrace, the steward says, teaches where private correction fails. The steward says many things in the tone of a man who has never been improved by them. You walk behind the cracked cartwheel that was brought from the keep stable to haul sacks of barley and a chest of old gear needing repair. It squeaks at every turn, a familiar little complaint from earlier days, as if it too has been drafted into moral instruction. The dog follows beneath the cart, appearing and disappearing between spokes, utterly pleased with the market travel. If any creature understands disgrace, it has wisely chosen not to say. The town gate opens onto a lane already alive with noise. Merchants have come in from farms, hamlets, abbey lands, and river crossings. Stalls line the square in uneven rows beneath awnings patched with old sailcloth and waxed linen. There are baskets of onions, heaps of turnips, smoked fish strung on cords, coarse loaves, wooden bowls, iron nails, wool caps, cheap knives, pilgrim badges shaped like shells and saints, little clay whistles, bunches of dried herbs, and a man selling miracle tooth cures with the confidence of someone whose own mouth remains mostly hidden. The market smells of bread, mud, animals, cabbage, smoke, leather, and humanity doing its best before noon. A woman argues over the weight of cheese. A potter insists his jugs never leak unless misused by fools, weather, or liquids. A friar moves between stalls asking alms for the poor, though some swear he also has a remarkable memory for which households bake the better pies. No one can quite agree whether this is holiness, appetite, or a practical combination of both. At the centre of the square stands the market cross, a stone shaft rising from 3 worn steps. Around it gather children, traders, apprentices, servants, and old men who have sensed that official unpleasantness is about to become public entertainment. You see manor justice often enough in such places, fines proclaimed, weights tested, scolds warned, dishonest sellers shamed, runaway servants named, debts remembered. A market cross hears more truth, lies, and bargaining than most confessionals, and with far less privacy. Tom is led to the lowest step. The steward unrolls a parchment and reads the judgment aloud. His voice carries cleanly over the square. Tom of the lower ford, owing service, having sworn to stand, did abandon his place in the line before Grayford Field. For this he loses pay, weapon, and standing until restored by service, he will labour at the keep, bear public shame this day, and be marked in record. The words are not shouted, they do not need to be. They settle over the square like cold dust. People look. That is the punishment first and deepest being looked at without shelter. Tom stares at the stones before his boots. His hair has been cut roughly at the nape, another sign of disgrace, uneven as if the shears themselves wish to avoid the task. In some places, they say, a coward might be given a distaff to hold, or dressed in a woman's garment, not because women are weak, but because men in authority have always enjoyed insulting two groups at once when one would do. Here, the captain has forbidden such mockery. Shame, he said, must be enough. Whether that is mercy or merely tidiness, even now, it is hard to tell. A few jeers come, thin and uncertain. Will the carter stand among the soldiers near the edge of the square, jaw tight? He does not laugh. The grey-bearded archer has come too, buying a twist of bowstring wax from a stall while watching everything with tired eyes. The priest remains near the church porch, fingers tucked into his sleeves, his face folded into thought. Near him, an old woman touches a pilgrim badge at her breast and mutters that fear is a devil with soft feet. Another says fear is just sense arriving early. Those who tell the tale never fully agree which old woman was wiser. A boy tosses a clod of mud toward the steps. It falls short. His mother cuffs him gently, then crosses herself, perhaps against cruelty, perhaps against embarrassment, perhaps because mothers have many uses for one gesture. The dog trots forward, sniffs Tom's empty belt, and sits beside the market cross as if this is all a rather dull form of waiting. A ripple of laughter moves through the crowd, softer this time, almost kind despite itself. Tom does not lift his head. The bells of the town church ring terse over the square, and for a moment their sound covers the muttering. Stalls continue their business, coins pass, bread is wrapped. A chicken escapes from a basket and creates more alarm than the reading of judgment, which says much about both chickens and human attention. Life, stubborn and slightly rude, continues around disgrace. You stand in the cold market air and understand that this is the cruelty of shame. It does not strike once and finish. It clings. It waits in doorways. It sits beside you at feasts. It returns when your name is spoken too softly. Tom's fate is not the field now, nor the captain's table, nor the scribe's ink alone. It is every glance that measures him, and every mouth that decides whether fear is unforgivable when seen from the safety of a stall selling onions. When the steward finally rolls the parchment and nods, Tom is led down from the step. His face remains lowered, but as he passes the dog, the animal rises and follows him a few paces before being distracted by a dropped crust. This is not loyalty in any noble sense, perhaps, but it is warmer than most justice. You follow the company back toward the bridge as market noise swells behind you. The cross remains in the square, wet stone under grey light, ready for the next debt, the next quarrel, the next human failing made public. And somewhere beneath the bells, beneath the cries of sellers, beneath the cartwheel's squeal, Tom's name changes again, carried from tongue to tongue, lighter in some mouths, heavier in others, never quite his own. By late afternoon, the road from the market turns toward the Abbey, and you follow it under a dimming sky where crows move like scraps of torn cloak above the winter fields. Greyford Keep lies behind you now, its walls half hidden by river mist, while ahead the Abbey roofs rise beyond a belt of bare orchards. The bells there are gentler than the Keep's bell, deeper too, as if rung by men who believe time itself should walk slowly and wash its hands before supper. The company has split for errands, patrols, and repairs, and you travel with a smaller group: the steward, the ink-stained scribe, 2 guards, the priest, Tom walking in silence, and the dog, who has decided that shame, justice, and monastic hospitality are all improved by his supervision. The cracked cartwheel squeaks behind you on the barley cart, not because it must come to the Abbey, but because the smith there is said to mend ironwork cheaply if paid in grain and flattery. No one can quite agree whether monks are humble about flattery, but most agree they notice when it is absent. The Abbey gatehouse receives you with a low arch, a carved saint above the entrance, and a porter so old and dry he looks as if he's been stored among parchment rolls. He peers at the steward's seal, then at Tom's lowered face, then at the dog with the deepest suspicion of all. Dogs are not always welcome in holy houses, owing to their habits, their fleas, and their troubling lack of Latin. Yet the porter sighs, opens the gate, and says that God made all creatures, though some appear to require additional editing. Inside, the Abbey close is quiet. Gravel paths glimmer with damp. A cloister walks around a square garth of winter grass. Smoke rises from the bakehouse. Somewhere, a brother carries a basket of leeks beneath his robe as if smuggling green secrets. You pass the guest house, where pilgrims sleep on straw pallets beneath wool blankets, their badges pinned to cloaks' Canterbury shells. Little pewter saints, a tiny ampulla said to have held holy water. Some swear that a badge touched to a true shrine can protect a traveller from thieves, fevers, and bad inns. Others say it mainly proves a traveller has already survived all 3. The scribe is taken to the writing room near the cloister, and you go with him because the steward wants the day's judgment entered into the Abbey copy, as well as the Lord's roll. In troubled times, records breed like mice. A thing written in one place may be lost to damp, fire, rats, bad wax, worse memory, or a nephew with ambitions. A thing written twice begins to look like truth. The room is narrow, cold, and filled with a smell that seems made of ink, scraped skin, dust, wool sleeves, and patient misery. 3 monks sit at sloped desks near the windows, catching the last grey light. Their fingers are dark with ink. One sharpens a quill with a little knife. Another rubs a pumice stone over parchment to smooth it. A third scratches words so small and neat that you suspect angels would need spectacles. The Abbey scribe, Brother Matthew, receives the steward's account and listens without much expression. His face is pale, his eyes red from close work, and one thumb is wrapped in linen where the knife has bitten him. He asks for names, places, witnesses, oath, field, judgment. He writes each answer with care. Tom sits on a low stool near the wall, hands folded, not asked to speak unless spoken to. The dog lies beneath the desk and sighs, perhaps judging the prose. When Brother Matthew reaches the matter of cowardice, he pauses. Did he flee from fear, he asks, or from belief that the line had broken? The steward says the field held. The scribe from Grayford says witnesses differ. The priest says fear and confusion often wear the same cloak. Tom says nothing. Brother Matthew dips his quill again. Then it should be written that witnesses differ. The steward frowns. He prefers records with clean corners. He abandoned his place. So I shall write, says Brother Matthew, and also that some testified confusion in the mist. This produces a silence as delicate as candle flame. Even now, it is hard to tell whether Brother Matthew is merciful, stubborn, precise, or simply devoted to the unpleasant habit of accuracy. Monks, you learn, may be obedient in all things except a sentence they believe is crooked. He writes slowly, shaping Tom not as a monster, not as a hero, not as a lesson carved from stone, but as a man standing in fog, hearing cries, leaving his place, and being judged for it. That is still ruin enough, but it is not quite the same ruin. As the light fails, a novice brings candles of pale beeswax and sets them between the desks. Their glow softens the room. Outside, the abbey bell calls the brothers toward vespers. The sound passes through the walls, round and steady, and the monks lay down their quills as if sleep itself has entered with a rule. Brother Matthew sands the fresh ink, waits, then blows the grains aside. Those who tell the tale never fully agree which version survives longest: the market's harsh version, the captain's stern version, Will's guilty version, or the monk's careful line about mist and confusion. Perhaps all of them survive, walking different roads in different mouths. You leave the writing room with a smell of ink still clinging to your thoughts. In the guest house, bowls of thin stew wait beside coarse bread. Tom eats little. The priest speaks softly with him near the hearth. The steward counts seals and mutters about expense. The cracked cart wheel rests outside the smithy door. The dog sleeps under the table, paws twitching, perhaps chasing rabbits through a world with no judgments at all. Night gathers around the abbey stones, and the bells mark time with the patience no battlefield possesses. You settle onto a straw pallet beneath a rough wool blanket, listening to the rain begin again on the roof. Somewhere nearby, Brother Matthew's ink dries into record. Not forgiveness, not release, but a narrow space where uncertainty remains alive, and in a hard world, even that can feel like a small candle guarded from the wind. Morning at the abbey arrives in layers: first the bell before dawn, then the shuffling of monks in the cloister, then the thin light sliding along the guest-house wall, and finally the smell of bread from the bakehouse, which does more for the soul than many sermons are willing to admit. You wake beneath a wool blanket that has spent the night arguing with your knees. Straw clings to your sleeve. Your breath hangs pale above you, and for a few moments you do not remember the field, the market cross or Tom's lowered face. Then the bell rings again, and memory returns like a hand on the shoulder. The guest house is dim and smoky. Pilgrims stir on their pallets, coughing softly, tying shoes, searching for lost pins, and patting at pouches with the anxious reverence of travellers making sure coins, badges, and sins are still where they left them. A woman with a patched cloak pins a pewter shell to her breast before rising. A lame man rubs his knee with a salve of goose fat and ground herbs, insisting it eases pain if applied while facing east. No one can quite agree whether east improves medicine, but at dawn it at least gives a man something hopeful to look toward. Tom sits near the hearth with a wooden bowl in his hands, though there is nothing left in it but steam. His hair is still uneven where it was cut for shame. His grey cloak hangs from his shoulders. He looks less like a soldier now, and more like a man who has been misplaced by his own life. The priest speaks with Brother Matthew near the doorway, low and careful. The steward has gone ahead with the cart toward Greyford, taking the repaired iron rim for the cracked wheel and leaving behind instructions that Tom be sent onward under watch to serve labour at the keep after completing a short errand along the pilgrim road. This is how you come to walk with him. Not as a guard exactly, not as a friend exactly. Medieval arrangements often live in the muddy space between words. The priest must carry a message to a small shrine 2 miles beyond the abbey lands, where a widow has endowed candles for her husband's soul. Brother Matthew has asked that a copy of the market judgment be delivered to a manor clerk farther along the road. Tom, stripped of pay and weapon, is given the bundle to carry. It is low work, but not useless work. And in a world that distrusts useless men, this matters. You leave after sunrise beneath bare apple branches. Frost silvers the grass of the abbey orchard. The dog follows, of course, after eating something beside the bakehouse that no one wishes to identify. The priest pretends not to notice. Brother Matthew stands at the gate with ink still on his fingers and says to Tom, "Walk steadily, not bravely, not proudly, steadily." The pilgrim road bends eastward between hedges and brown fields. It is not much more than a beaten track, rutted by carts and hooves, edged with brambles and little posts marked by crosses. Here and there, travellers have tied scraps of cloth to thorn branches, offerings or prayers or reminders of pains they hope to leave behind. Some swear that tying cloth near a holy road helps sickness pass from body to branch, though others suspect it mostly gives hedges a wardrobe. Still, the little faded knots flutter in the cold air with a tenderness hard to mock for long. Tom walks silently at first, the document bundle wrapped in oilcloth against his chest. Without his spear, his hands seem uncertain what shape to take. The priest leads, tapping the mud with the staff. You walk beside Tom, hearing the soft crush of frost under boots and the dog's occasional snuffling among leaves. At the first wayside cross, you stop. It is made of weathered oak, leaning slightly, carved with a figure so worn by rain that the face has become almost featureless. The priest says a prayer for travellers, for soldiers, for those who return, and for those who return changed. Tom bows his head. You notice his wrist, where the charm cord has torn away, leaving a faint red line. His mother's herbs are gone somewhere in the field mud, or the ditch, or the shepherd's hut where he was found. Some swear a lost charm takes misfortune with it. Others say losing it proves misfortune already knows the road. Near midday, you meet pilgrims coming from the south, 2 women, a bearded man with a staff, and a young apprentice carrying a pouch of badges to sell near shrines. They greet the priest warmly, then look at Tom's grey cloak and uneven hair, with that quick, sharp curiosity people pretend is accidental. One woman asks whether there was fighting near Greyford. The priest says yes. The bearded pilgrim asks whether the line held. The priest says yes again. No one asks Tom anything. That is almost worse. The road continues past a frozen pond where reeds tremble in the wind. You share bread beneath a thorn tree. The bread is coarse, the cheese hard, the ale sour enough to suggest it has chosen a difficult path in life. The dog receives crusts from everyone and judges no one, which may be why saints are sometimes painted with animals and rarely with clerks. Tom finally speaks while staring at the pond. I heard them say the banner was down. The priest does not answer at once. You listen to the reeds ticking softly against ice. At times, the priest says, men hear what fear has made ready for them. Tom's mouth tightens, then it was still my doing. The priest nods slowly. Yes. There is no cruelty in it. No comfort either. Only a truth laid down gently enough that it does not shatter on impact. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether this was the first moment Tom began to mend, or merely the moment he understood that mending would not mean being unchanged. Shame has followed him from the field to the market, from the market to the abbey, and now along this pilgrim road where every stranger's glance feels like a small court, yet the road also moves. That is its quiet mercy. A man who is seen in one place may be seen differently in another, if he keeps walking long enough. By afternoon, you reach the little shrine beside a spring. Stones have been set around the water, and a roof of mossy shingles shelters a small painted saint. The priest lights the widow's candles, their flames wavering in the damp air. Pilgrims have left pins, beads, and one tiny wooden crutch. Tom sets the oilcloth bundle down carefully and kneels, not dramatically, not with any grand speech, but because the ground is there and his knees seem to decide before pride can object. You stand nearby as the spring murmurs under stones. Even now, it is hard to tell whether holy places change a man, or whether they simply let him be quiet enough to hear the change already beginning. Tom touches the cold water to his brow. The dog drinks from the edge, which is possibly less reverent but more practical. When you rise to continue, the sun has lowered behind clouds, and the road ahead looks silver with frost. Tom lifts the bundle again. He walks a little straighter, not proudly, not forgiven, not free of the name spoken at the market cross, but steadily, as Brother Matthew asked. Behind you, the shrine candles burn small and gold beside the spring, and before you the pilgrim road carries shame, prayer, mud, and the faint possibility that a life may narrow for a time without ending altogether. By evening, snow begins to fall in small uncertain flakes, the kind that seem to be testing the earth before committing themselves. You follow the pilgrim road northward as the light drains from the fields, and every hedge, ditch, and bare branch softens beneath a pale dusting. The priest has turned back toward the abbey after delivering his candles and prayers, leaving you, Tom, and 2 quiet guards from Greyford to carry the copied record toward the manor clerk. The dog remains, naturally, having chosen neither law nor mercy but whichever road smells most interesting. Cold gathers quickly. It enters through seams, cuffs, collars, and every private arrangement of clothing you believed sufficient. Your cloak stiffens at the edges. Tom's grey wool cloak is drawn close around him, and the oilcloth bundle rests beneath it, guarded from snow. The road grows narrow between dark fields, and soon the only sound is the soft crush of boots, the creak of leather, and the occasional bell from a distant farm animal moving in the dusk. Ahead, a hall appears beyond a line of ash trees, not a castle, not quite a manor, but a timbered house of some lesser noble or prosperous knight, set behind a low wall with a barn, stable, and dovecote nearby. Warm light glows in the cracks of its shutters. Smoke rises thick from the roof vent. The guards know the place. Sir Aldred, they say, old retainer of the Lord, keeps winter hospitality there for travellers bearing seals, messages, or convincing sorrow. No one can quite agree whether hospitality in winter is an act of Christian charity, local pride, or fear that one day your own horse will go lame in front of someone else's door. In practice, it matters little. A closed door in snow can become a sermon no one wants to hear. You're received in the yard by a servant with a lantern, a red nose, and the guarded expression of someone deciding whether strangers bring news, lice, or both. The Lord's seal opens the matter. You're led through an oak door banded with iron into a hall bright with firelight and smelling of rushes, roasted onions, damp wool, dogs, and old smoke. The warmth strikes your face so kindly that for a moment you forgive the entire century. Sir Aldred sits near the hearth in a fur-lined cloak, his hair white, his hands thick-knuckled, one leg stretched stiffly before him on a stool. A sword hangs on the wall behind him, but it is dusty now, more memory than threat. His hall is modest but orderly wooden benches, trestle tables, a chest with carved panels, a row of pewter cups, herbs hanging from a beam, and a shelf of horn spoons polished by long use. Rushes cover the floor, mixed with lavender and meadow sweet to sweeten the air. The household dogs lift their heads as you enter, see your travelling companion dog, and decide, after a brief diplomatic exchange of sniffing, that no war need be declared. You're given pottage thick with barley, onions, and a little salted pork, along with coarse bread warmed near the fire. It is not a feast, but after the snowy road, it tastes like a royal secret. Tom eats carefully, still with the manner of a man unsure whether he's allowed to take up space. Sir Aldred watches him over the rim of his cup. The guards tell the old knight enough, not all, but enough. For a while, Sir Aldred says nothing. The fire pops. Snow ticks softly at the shutters. A servant mends a torn sleeve near the hearth. Somewhere in the back of the hall, a child is hushed and sent away before hearing things adults pretend are too heavy for children, though children usually hear the shape of them anyway. At last, Sir Aldred gestures toward the bench near his stool. Sit closer, boy. Tom stiffens at being called boy, though he comes. The old knight studies him without cruelty. They made you stand at the cross. Tom nods. Good, says Sir Aldred. The word lands hard. Tom looks down. Then the old man adds, and bad. Both can be true, though clerks dislike that. One of the guards nearly smiles into his cup. Sir Aldred reaches for a small pouch beside his stool and takes from it a dried sprig of betony. He rolls it between his fingers. Some swear betony protects against nightmares, ill winds, and cowardly thoughts, though others say it mostly helps old men feel busy while their knees complain. He tosses it into the fire. The herb flares with a faint bitter scent. I have seen men run, he says. I have seen men stand for foolish reasons. I have seen men die because they were too proud to step aside when stepping aside would have saved better men than themselves. No one sings that properly. The hall is quiet now. Even the dogs seem respectful or sleepy, which can look similar by firelight. Tom's voice is low. I left my place. Yes, says Sir Aldred. That is the part you do not soften. If you soften it too much, it follows you forever, whining to be fed. This is not the comfort Tom hoped for. Perhaps, but it is something sturdier. The old knight leans back, face lined by firelight. But listen well. Fear is not treason by itself. Fear is a bell inside the ribs. Sometimes it warns, sometimes it lies. Sometimes it rings so loudly a man cannot hear command, friend, priest, or his own name. The task is not to pretend the bell is silent. The task is to learn when not to obey it. Even now, it is hard to tell whether he speaks from wisdom, regret, or some old memory hidden deeper than scars. Those who tell the tale never fully agree what battle bent Sir Aldred's leg or why he no longer rides with the Lord's men. Some say an axe found him at a bridge. Some say a horse crushed him during retreat. Some say he stood when others ran, and afterward wished he'd been less eager to be admired. Tom looks into the fire and the flames shine in his tired eyes. Sir Aldred calls for another blanket and tells the servant to give Tom work in the morning before he goes chopping kindling, carrying water, clearing snow from the threshold. Hands mend what tongues ruin slowly, he says. Not fully, not always, but slowly is the only pace most healing knows. Later, after bowls are emptied and the shutters barred, you settle near the hearth beneath a wool blanket that smells of cedar smoke and storage. The copied record lies safe in its oilcloth near Tom's feet. The dog curls against the warm stones, having earned nothing and received everything, a lifestyle many nobles pursue with less charm. Snow thickens beyond the walls, softening road, field, hedge, and ditch beneath one quiet covering. You hear Sir Aldred breathing in his chair, half asleep. You hear Tom shifting once, then growing still. You hear the fire settle lower in this snowbound hall, with old weapons on the wall and herbs smoking faintly in the embers. Shame does not disappear. But it sits nearer the hearth now, less like a sentence and more like a wound under clean linen, still tender, still real, but no longer the only thing in the room. Morning finds the world changed under snow, not deeply, not enough to bury roads or silence carts, but enough to soften every hard edge and make the hedges look as if they have grown old overnight. You step from Sir Aldred's hall into a yard washed pale beneath a quiet sky. Smoke rises straight from the roof vent. The barn doors creak open. A servant scatters grain for chickens, who rush forward with the urgency of merchants hearing a rumour of cheap wool. Tom is already awake. You find him near the well, sleeves rolled despite the cold, hauling water in 2 wooden buckets while a stable boy watches with the solemn satisfaction of someone seeing his own work given to another. Snow clings to Tom's rough-cut hair. His grey cloak hangs on a peg by the door so it will not drag in the slush. Without it, he looks less like a marked man and more like any tired servant beginning a winter morning. Cold hands, bent shoulders, breath rising white, boots dark with damp. Sir Aldred stands under the porch in his fur-lined cloak, leaning on a carved staff. He says nothing for a time, only watches as Tom carries water to the stable trough, returns, and hauls again. Work has a rhythm that speech often lacks. Rope over wet wood, bucket rising, water trembling, steps across packed snow, pour, return, repeat. It is not glory. It is not forgiveness. It is simply the old world asking to be kept alive. Inside the hall, you eat barley bread warmed on the hearth and drink small ale from a wooden cup. A servant gives you a slice of hard cheese wrapped in linen for the road. Another presses a few dried apple rings into your palm, saying they're good against a sour stomach, low spirits, and the sort of hunger that makes travellers stare too long at other people's hens. Some swear dried apple carried in the left pouch keeps a man from losing his way. Others say it only helps if he remembers to eat it before making bad decisions. Medieval navigation, you begin to suspect, is mostly mud, memory, and snacks. By mid-morning, you leave the hall with the 2 guards and Tom, carrying the oilcloth bundle onward. Sir Aldred does not bless Tom, not exactly. He only places one heavy hand on his shoulder and says, "When the bell rings next, listen longer before you move." Tom nods. The road back toward the first village lies beyond the manor clerk's house, where the copied record is delivered to a narrow man with ink on his cuffs and suspicion in his eyebrows. He receives the bundle, checks the seal, and makes 3 notes on a wax tablet. He asks no questions in front of Tom, which may be kindness, caution, or merely the clerkly fear of starting a conversation that might require more parchment. From there, The way bends west through fields, past low barns and frozen ditches, toward the lands you crossed before the battle. The snow begins to melt where cartwheels have pressed. The cracked wheel, now repaired, waits outside a smithy near the road, and when it turns again under the barley cart, its old squeak is softer, not gone but changed. You notice this because journeys teach the ear small loyalties. The dog trots ahead, then behind, then ahead again, performing the work of 3 scouts and 1 fool. At a roadside shrine, you pause where ribbons hang stiff with frost from a thorn bush. Tom looks at the little offerings but does not touch them. His wrist, where the charm cord once marked him, is bare. No one can quite agree whether a man who has lost his charm should seek another at once, or walk unguarded until his courage grows its own skin. Tom seems to choose the second, though perhaps only because he has no coin. Near noon, bells reach you across the fields. At first, they are faint, only a tremor in the air. Then they come clearer, the chapel bell of the village where this journey began, where the muster roll was called in rain, where women stood under doorways and names became public things. The sound moves over snow-patched earth, over bare orchards, over the mill stream and the winter cabbages, and settles in your chest with a strange familiarity. You see Tom hear it too. He stops walking for half a breath, then continues. The village appears beyond the mill, smoke rising from cottages, geese moving along the lane like small officials in white cloaks. The mill wheel turns slowly, darker now against the snowmelt. Chalk crosses still mark the mill door, smudged by weather but visible. The old woman who spat after the company days ago stands near a fence with a bundle of sticks. She sees Tom and grows still. Then, as always, the village begins to look. A man chopping wood pauses with his axe raised. 2 women at the well lower their voices. A boy points until his sister pulls his hand down. At the alehouse door, the sign creaks in the wind, and a cluster of men who've been doing nothing with great industry turn their faces toward the road. The bell rings again from the chapel tower. It is not a muster now, only the hour, yet it feels as though the village is counting the return. Tom's mother comes from a cottage near the lower lane. She does not run. Medieval mothers do not always perform grief in ways that please storytellers. She walks carefully through the mud and thinning snow, shawl tight around her shoulders, eyes fixed on her son's face. When she reaches him, she sees the cut hair, the empty belt, the grey cloak folded over his arm, the absence of the charm she tied there. Her mouth tightens, but she does not weep. She touches his cheek once, with 2 cold fingers. Some swear she said, "You are home." Others say she said, "You are alive." Those who tell the tale never fully agree, perhaps because each listener hears the mercy they most need. Will the carter is there too, standing near the smith's shed. He has returned before you, his billhook hung at his side, his broad face troubled. For a moment, neither man speaks. Then Will steps forward and hands Tom something small, the torn charm cord, muddy and dried, found near the field and brought back without announcement. The herbs are mostly gone, the cloth is stained, it looks like nothing, and yet Tom holds it as if it weighs more than iron. Even now, it is hard to tell whether this is apology, friendship, guilt, or simply one frightened man returning what belonged to another. But the village sees it. The village will speak of it. By supper, the story will already have changed. Some will say Tom ran like a hare. Some will say he was misled by fog. Some will say the captain showed mercy. Some will say shame was too light. Some will say every man has a bell inside him, and not every man learns which ringing to trust. You pass toward the manor green as evening gathers. The same hall waits with rushes on the floor, smoke in the rafters, and candles beginning to glow. The bell falls silent. In that silence, Tom's name returns to the place that first called it, altered, bruised, not clean, not lost. And you understand that in a medieval village, fate is never held by one mouth for long. It is passed from hearth to hearth, softened here, sharpened there, until even cowardice becomes a tale about weather, witnesses, bells, and the difficult mercy of coming home. Evening settles over the manor green with the careful hush that comes after snow has begun to melt. The ground is dark and soft beneath your boots, patched here and there with white along fence rails, cart ruts, and the shaded sides of walls. Smoke lifts from cottage roofs into a violet dusk. The chapel bell has finished marking the hour, but its last note seems to remain among the bare branches, held there like breath. You stand near the low watchfire beside the manor yard, warming your hands while villagers gather in slow, ordinary ways, not for muster now, not for judgment, for warmth, for news, for the comfort of standing near other bodies while winter closes its fist. A boy brings broken sticks in his arms. An old man lowers himself onto an overturned bucket with a groan that sounds older than the bucket. The dog, faithful to no law except appetite and heat, lies close enough to the fire to be admired and mildly endangered. Inside the manor hall, rushes have been freshly spread. You can smell their green sweetness through the open door, mixed with smoke, boiled onions, wool, and the faint honeyed breath of beeswax candles. The half-burned candle you remember from the first night is gone, of course, but another burns in its place, folding slowly into itself on the trestle table. Medieval evenings are full of replacements pretending not to be symbols. Tom sits on a low bench near the wall, not at the centre, not hidden either. His mother sits beside him with her hands folded beneath her shawl. Will the carter stands across the room, speaking little, though he has brought a bundle of split wood to the hearth without being asked. The grey-bearded archer rests near the door, waxing his bowstring by habit, though there is no call to arms tonight. The priest moves quietly between people, receiving nods, giving murmured blessings, and pretending not to notice which men avoid Tom's eyes and which men look too long. No one can quite agree what should happen after shame has done its appointed work. Some believe a man once marked remains marked forever, like a cracked bell that may still ring but never purely. Others say a man is more like winter earth, spoiled on the surface, stubborn underneath, able to take seed again if the season is patient. In truth, village memory is neither generous nor just. It is a storehouse where grudges, jokes, mercy, hunger, and boredom are all kept in neighbouring bins. The manor reeve arrives with his iron key and wax tablet. He speaks with the steward near the high table, then with the priest, then with Tom. There is no grand proclamation. Tom is to serve in the manor stores through the next weeks, lifting sacks, repairing hurdles, carrying grain, cleaning harness, mending what he can mend. His pay is gone, his weapon kept, his name bruised in the roll, yet he is not cast out. In a hard village, this is not nothing. You watch him nod. His mother unwraps a small cloth bundle and gives him coarse bread with a slice of cheese. The gesture is ordinary enough to pass unnoticed by anyone not listening closely to the world. But you have walked roads where shrines lean in frost, watched ink dry into record, stood beside the market cross, and heard old soldiers speak beside snowbound fires. You know ordinary gestures can be stronger than iron doors. A mother feeding a shamed son may not erase disgrace. But it tells disgrace it will not have the table entirely to itself. Outside, the watchfire sinks lower. You step back into the yard with a wooden cup of thin ale warming your palms. The sky has cleared. Stars prick through the dark above the manor roof, cold and sharp. Somewhere beyond the mill, the river moves beneath mist. The repaired cartwheel rests near the shed, quieter now after its mending. At the roadside shrine, ribbons stiffen again in the night air. Farther still, beyond field and hedge and keep, the grey battlefield lies empty, holding dropped footprints, broken shafts, and whatever fear leaves behind when men have gone home. Those who tell the tale never fully agree on Tom's fate. Some say he never bore arms again, and became the most careful keeper of grain in 3 parishes. Some say he stood years later in another muster, and did not move when the shouting began. Some say he left on pilgrimage with a badge on his cloak and returned quieter, thinner, kinder. Some say nothing changed at all, which is often what people say when change is too slow to entertain them. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the cruel fate of cowards is punishment from captains, scorn from neighbours, ink from scribes, or the long inward work of remembering the moment one's feet obeyed fear. Perhaps it is all of these. Perhaps the cruelty lies in being reduced to a single frightened breath when a life is longer, muddier, and more difficult than one breath can hold. The dog rises, circles twice, and settles against your boot as if closing the matter. The hall behind you glows warm through the open door. Voices lower, wooden cups knock softly against the table. Someone begins telling the story already, not loudly, and not quite accurately. That is how it will travel now by hearth, by alehouse, by market stall, by monk's margin, by old woman's warning, by soldier's sigh. Fear will become lesson, shame will become tale. Mercy will become a detail some remember and some forget. You stand beside the watchfire until the flames become red caves in the ash and the village breathes itself towards sleep. The night grows softer now, and the road no longer asks anything of your feet. The bell is quiet in its little tower. The manor hall settles behind oak doors, and the last candlelight rests along the cracks like warm thread. You draw your cloak close, not from fear now, but from the simple cold that belongs to every winter village, every stone wall, every field waiting beneath stars. The dog sleeps, the cartwheel is still, the rushes lie fresh upon the floor, somewhere. Tom's mother folds away the torn charm cord, perhaps in a chest, perhaps beneath a pillow, perhaps in the secret place where families keep what history would rather simplify. The priest banks the chapel candle, the scribe's ink dries far away in the abbey, but here the world needs no more writing tonight. You let the old sounds fade one by one, the murmur of men at the hearth, the soft clink of a cup, the wind at the thatch, the river beyond the mill, the sleepy shift of horses in the dark. Fear has had its hour, judgment has had its voice. Mercy, quiet and imperfect, remains near the embers. So you rest here at the edge of the medieval night, safe beneath the slow turning of time. The cold stones hold their silence. The smoke thins into the rafters. The stars keep watch without hurry. And as the fire lowers, as the village grows dim, as every hard word softens into shadow, you may let your own thoughts loosen too, gently, steadily, until the old road disappears behind your closed eyes and the dark becomes only darkness, warm around the edges, peaceful and kind.